Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Strange Encounters Downunder. And for this episode, we've got a guest. We've got Greg Doyle here with us, and Greg has had a very unusual experience. And Greg, I don't know whether you call it astral travel or out-of-body experiences, or what would you call it?
That's a very good question, Sheryl. Great to be on the show, by the way. I would call it a bit of both. I think a lot of people have asked me what I think it is. I think for me, the out-of-body experience is when you kind of go out in real time, what I call real-time astral, like when you're like a kind of basically like a ghost and you see your body. Whereas the astral experience, to my mind, is when you go into other dimensions kind of stuff. So the out-of-body experience is kind of like in this dimension, but you're out. So what I call kind of the fourth dimension, the closest dimension.
Right.
So that's the kind of what I think is the difference, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you just kick us off? I know you've written a book, and we'll talk about that at the end. And you've got your experiences in there, but why don't you kick us off with how it all started? And I'm particularly interested, and probably Ben too, that you actually saw a being that you thought was an extraterrestrial, or possibly. And just tell us about your experience.
Well, it did start out with a bang. I remember I was asleep one night. This was 23 years ago now, in March. And I was just asleep, and then basically woken up by a light coming to my forehead. And really, I became incredibly lucid. So I was absolutely aware that my body was asleep, but my mind was utterly awake. Not like a kind of a dream mind, but absolutely aware that my mind was awake. And it was coming with this light that was coming to my forehead, was also getting more and more, it was getting stronger and stronger. And there was also a wind to it, like a wind in my ears, which was really weird. And it was also, and I remember it also flowed into my heart, so I felt really good. That was one thing that I kind of equate with the astral experience, is often this feeling of kind of like, it's almost like an ecstatic feeling, just this incredible feeling of well-being. I felt so good. So I wasn't afraid because of this feeling in my heart. And it was like the light was kind of, I felt inviting me to go with it. So, and I did. I sort of made this conscious decision to go. I remember that. And then I found myself going down what I would later describe as a wormhole, because this was the first time I had such an experience. Kind of a twisting kind of tunnel. And then I came out I was hovering above, like it was the landscape, incredibly vividly clear, like much clearer in this reality. I was hovering above, and I was watching these, it was kind of an arid landscape. And there were these very tall buildings that were like on towers, disc-shaped at the top, but actual congruent towers with lots of windows. Like these were big towers. You could see lights on in some not. So I was very much aware that I was on a place that was not Earth, basically. And it was the feeling to me that it was like this contact with some other beings. And it was just, I remember coming back after that experience thinking, it was very random, incredibly real, very loving, very unearthly. And, I couldn't go back after that. That was the beginning of something absolutely extreme. And it was just the first of many experiences like that.
Was it like standing in a three-dimensional world? Like when you're in a dream, it still tends to be just a field of vision. Could you like turn around and see it in like that sort of depth of reality?
Yeah, I would actually call it like a higher dimensional world in 3D. In that everything, that was what really got me to. I think that's why these experiences I could often stay in for a while, because I was just so amazed with the the reality and the high def of the whole thing. You know, like I could sort of see around things, and you know, it was like, yeah, it was so much more vivid than the 3D reality. That was the sticking point. Incredible.
Mm. So when you said you went through a wormhole, I mean, this is the sort of like a tunnel wormhole. This is the sort of thing that people have near-death experiences talk about, isn't it? Could you sort of equate to that? Could you relate to that at all? Same.
Yeah, and I only came across that lingo of the wormhole. Like, I wasn't really into this kind of thing. I never really was seeking this kind of experience. And then, like a week later, I was living in Austria at the time, and when they still had video stores, and the VHS, and I was going past a store, and I saw the Jodie Foster movie Contact, and then I was kind of felt to watch that great movie. That scene just moved me. I remember it moved me to tears, because that's exactly what I'd felt I'd experienced. That feeling of, that was where I got this notion of the wormhole. I even wrote to the creators of that movie to find out where did I get that idea from. But this is very much the feeling of when I went out that first time. I had no body. It was a feeling that I knew where my body was. I knew I wasn't dying. I felt very light, but I was aware of the fact that I was just a point of consciousness, a very clear point of consciousness. So my mind was very kind of singular, for want of a better word, very focused, incredibly focused. And that is also one of the traits of the astral experience, is the mind is incredibly focused. That's why it's so blissful. There's no kind of nothing coming in to disturb that mind, nothing to fracture the mind. So I would equate it with probably a near-death experience, but I knew I wasn't dying.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Ben, go on.
Sorry, yeah. So, Greg, did you arrive at that state through meditation? Were you doing like a meditation, or were you simply resting? Was it obviously not sleeping per se? How did it commence?
Yeah, I was sleeping. I was asleep at the time, just before dawn. I mean, I'd meditated a lot for like, over 10 years before that. Prior to that, I'd meditated just for relaxation and because I used to be a musician. So it was kind of this, I used to meditate just so I could feel calm when I played music. And so I was never looking for any, conscious, bizarro spiritual kind of thing. But I was absolutely asleep. I was asleep. I remember I was asleep on my back. I found the astral experience would often happen when I'm lying on my back and my arms and legs are uncrossed, so symmetrical. I remember at that time waking up after it, and my hands, I remember, were kind of cupped, my fingers interlocked behind my third eye, which is interesting, the back of my third eye, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, that was interesting. And I remember the next night, it was even more weird in that when I closed my eyes, before I even fell asleep, the light came back. So I'd opened my eyes, the light wasn't there. I closed my eyes, the light came back. So that was scary because it wasn't kind of accompanied. I think when it comes out of sleep, when you come out of sleep, your mind, it's almost like you've been anesthetized. So it's a bit easier, but when it comes upon you in a full waking state, this kind of, as I said, it was a windy kind of light, that freaks you out, which it did the second night. I remember freaking me out, and I didn't want to fall asleep. I was a bit too scared to fall asleep. I didn't know what was going on.
And what about that light, Greg? Like when it was touching your forehead, and was it penetrating inside your head? Yeah,
it was a ball of light. I remember it brought together all of these triangles from inside, because I was aware that it was coming from the direction of my forehead. I remember it. I've since learned there's an expression when you close your eyes and you can kind of see static. They call them phosphenes. Okay. And I was aware that it brought together all of this light from behind my eyes in the shape of triangles, and it brought all these triangles into a very solid ball that really got stronger and stronger in intensity. So it felt like it was moving, felt like it was in my head, and it felt like it was alive,
right,
pulsating with life. And it felt like, looking back, it felt like a being actually from this. I sort of since learned that often you kind of communicate telepathically. So as I said, it was a feeling of very loving energy because it did come into my heart. And also it was a feeling of an invitation, definitely a feeling of an invitation. Like, do I want to go? Do I want to go? That was the definite feeling of pulling but it was my choice whether I want to go,
Yeah.
Hmm.
And the weeks following,
Oh man,
what happened?
kind of shattering, because I remember coming out of the first one thinking, okay, something's changed. This is bizarre. It was just so real. It felt so real. It felt so mind, so pure, and this loving energy. So the weeks that followed, basically, I remember the second one, or early on, there was this ET kind of thing happening. I remember, I had this experience. It came out of a dream. So I'd either be pulled out of a dream, or the lights would come, or sound would come, or like a vibration. So I remember I had this dream once where I was crossing a bridge. This was soon after the first one. And I was crossing the bridge in the dream. And on the other side of the bridge was this guy, a very small androgynous character, bald, in a silver bodysuit. And I remember these panels of light behind him, all these different panels. And I went up and hugged him because it was a dream. And then I remember he woke me from the dream. So I was hugging him, and I kind of felt like him, her. I felt I knew them. And I remember them. I remember very vividly kind of pushing me back, kind of a little bit taken aback by my kind of almost drunk embrace, if you like, and said, "Okay, Greg, I want to show you something." I remember this often using my name, and this woke me up. I remember, boom, I'm awake. And that was really weird. I remember then all of a sudden there were these, I was awake once again, awake, body asleep. And it was like I was looking through my brain, and there were like these laser lights coming, and sounding like a dentist drill, very uncomfortable. I was feeling lights coming to my brain, lasers, once again, the light thing. And I was about to pull out, thinking this is too intense. I knew I was okay. I knew that this was related to the initial thing because it was probably a few days later. And then that cleared, and then all of a sudden, all these sort of really modern instruments or machines, or I don't know what they were, very modern technology was like on a carousel, invisible carousel, was kind of going past my vision, and I had no idea what that was about. It was kind of like this was introduced into my mind, but I didn't know what it was. And I remember also, that's right, after the lasers and before these modern machines, there was a little video screen. I saw the corners, like on a video camera. I could see these little corners of a video screen being kind of fitted, and these strange hieroglyphs. When I say hieroglyphs, I didn't recognize them to be anything earthly, but I remember it was like a code, very technological. I remember being fitted the screen. I could see the four corners of it, and it was in the right-hand side, my vision. I remember as these hieroglyphs were kind of coming to my brain, I remember feeling in my brain like little coins dropping. Very pleasant feeling. That preceded being shown these weird instruments. So once again, but I was woken up that time through a dream by a being who you would have said was also a non-human being, and the panels of lights, very, very odd, So that was soon after, and then I remember another one soon after was, I remember wanting clarity, wanting clarification to this, what was going on. I remember actually demanding clarification. And then I was taken out of body 3 times in a row one night, even while I wasn't asleep. Same place, these 2 people called themselves guides. It was like a medieval inn. I remember it had the feeling of Wales. This woman, I remember she had blonde hair, and I remember I've seen her many times since, and she seems to be aging in Earth years alongside. So she's an ex-human who is now a guide of some kind. I remember poo-pooing them, and there was this guy next to them too. I remember they told me a lot about myself, and I remember I was often insulting them because I thought, what's going on, And I even asked them, where am I? I remember one of them saying, oh, we're in Gwyneth. And I said, as in Gwyneth Paltrow, and they were kind of having a giggle. Later on, I looked it up. Gwyneth spelled EDD at the end. That was how they pronounced it. It was a place of significance in the medieval times. Gwynedd would have been spelled that way. So they told me about these 7 realms. And I remember just thinking, well, this is, whatevs. I remember then this woman, the last time I was pulled back. So I keep on waking up, pulling myself out of it. Not that it was a nasty experience, but I just wanted to, I felt I was being hijacked. So I pulled out, but each time they'd pull me back, it was very congruent. It was not like a dream. They're calling me by my name. It was very, very real, different to a dreamscape or lucid dream. Last time I went back, she was showing me things like auras and this kind of stuff and chakras and showing me these beautiful colors. And then that was when I cut loose with some real insults. But just simply, that was the way I was reacting. I just wanted to see, you know. And I remember she smiled and looked me in the eyes and said, Greg, we've been watching you for some time. Why are you so sad? And I remember I woke up, I came to, and my whole body was vibrating. And I just thought, okay, this is some spiritual significance going on here. You know, that was the feeling. And that was how that whole thing, that was probably the first week of all those experiences.
Wow. And I'm just going to ask, were you sad?
Looking back, it was interesting because I think the very next experience was, I think looking back, I probably sometimes had depression like most humans. I remember at the time in my life thinking, people have asked me what was my mindset. I remember thinking, is that all there is? I don't know. I was kind of like, in the musical business and in the music business, the classical music, and I remember a lot of diplomacy going on, a lot of egos. I remember, I guess there was a bit of drinking in that business, which in all music businesses, but I just remember also meeting people who were kind of at the top of their game, thinking, really? Is that what it's all? I just remember thinking, really? Is this what? That's kind of what I was feeling. But soon after, when I realized that this was a spiritual experience or a spiritual happening, I had this amazing out-of-body experience where I all of a sudden became lucid. So I just was awake in this kind of void, what I call a void, which is nothingness. And then I heard my own voice speak to me. So I was calling him my higher self, not so much from the New Age perspective, but just from this. He seemed to know more than me, and it would sound like my voice. And he was booming through my crown. And he said, I want to see me. And that was pivotal. I remember then I saw myself as I was then. And then it was like a slideshow. Once again, the wind in the ears, and I got younger, became a baby, left. Then there was this old Chinese Mongolian guy, I never forget. I still see their faces really vividly. He also got younger, wind in the ears, eyes in the same place through all of these things. Became, a kid, baby, gone. Then there was this like African medicine man, probably in his 30s or so, and he had the full gear on, which was quite intense. And this is right in my face, looking ultra HD definition, like I'm sitting opposite someone, but even I could somehow see around them. And he also got younger, baby gone. Then the next one was a long-headed kind of extraterrestrial being. The background was not Earth. I remember freaking out then a bit, and I just sort of pulled out gently of the experience, which you can. And as I pulled out, a voice said, intermission. And it was a feeling like, you got zero choice in this, mate. But I remember that was the feeling. And then I remember I didn't know what that was. I had no idea what that was about. Then a few days later, someone I trusted, I mentioned this experience to, who I was going to some meditation thing with, and she said that sounded like a past life regression. And as she said, I remember my whole body vibrating like an astral vibration, and I knew it to be so. It was not that I thought, that could be, but I knew that I'd lived these other lives, and for some reason that alleviated some of this sense of suffering or this sadness of being human. I don't know what. For some reason, that experience alleviated this weight.
Did it answer the question that there is more? Do you think that might have been it? Like that there is
probably
more
did
experience? Yeah.
Yeah, logically, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't associate that to what I was thinking at the time in my life, but it definitely. I guess as humans, we all have a bit of trauma, and having had a pretty traumatic childhood, it kind of, for me, it was a feeling that a lot of what I wasn't necessarily just from this life, or a lot of my sadness or trauma, there was more going on. And for some reason, that alleviates that weight. On a logical level, hard to say why, and a lot of it isn't logical, it's energetic. And I would often have experiences where I would wake up in other bodies, experiencing life in another body, even in a past era, and it was like became very real. This notion of this interdimensional aspect of myself. So I kind of felt less alone in a way. Maybe, you know,
Wow.
maybe, yeah.
That's one of those catalyzing questions, isn't it? Like, is this all there is? It's like takes you on a journey. Then it's like you're out of the start gate. You're really on something deep. Then, you know, yeah.
Oh, totally. Also, the fact that this voice that seemed like my voice, which sometimes take me out of body, he used the words, "I want to see me." That's interesting that the way he said it. I want to see me. You know, they're often a cryptic way of speaking, but very clear, really.
Did you were these experiences in like real time, or did it feel like missing time? Like, would you have like what felt like half an hour, but it was like 3 hours later on our clock? Was there anything like that at all?
Yeah. That's a good point, because so as I said, I was being pulled out of sleep with these experiences. So but what I found is more and more I felt that they happen in a microsecond. So I did some experimentation where I would force myself to wake up as they're talking to me, and everything would speed up. The scene, everything would become just like a beep. So often when I felt, oh, what a pity that someone's woken me up, you know, outside, like, because the funny thing is, you can be having this astral experience, probably like a lucid dream or something, but you know exactly that your body is asleep. But then if something interrupts you from the outside, the survival mode of the physical body kicks in, and you tend to wake up, even if you know you're safe. And I'd often think, damn, you know, I'd like to stay there longer. But what I found is that experience is happening at an accelerated rate anyway. So it doesn't really matter. Often the astral experiences we'll remember are the ones we wake from as it is. So maybe you were meant to wake up so you can remember. Who knows? Because I think we're all going astral every night. That's from what I've seen. So I think we only remember a tiny proportion of those experiences, really.
Yeah. With Ben and my background in UFOs, I've got to drill you down about that being in a silver suit. Where do we start with that, Ben? I mean,
true.
If this is a sort of a I've often wondered about this when people have these experiences in altered states of consciousness, out of body, near death, etc. You know, are they really seeing what one might call extraterrestrials? If they are, okay, I get it. But if they're not, if they're sort of spirit beings of some description, why are they wearing silver suits?
It's very common, isn't it?
Silver
suits.
Okay, it is, right.
In the UFO field, in the contactee very literature, common. They're reported as wearing silver suits, and that's supposedly a real extraterrestrial. So I'm wondering whether you've actually seen a real extraterrestrial, or when one is peeking into your out of body experience, or they're where humans and extraterrestrials intersect. Or there's a space or place or a how they can intersect with our consciousness.
I reckon it's that, because I think, you know, I've often wondered how they have the ability, because I used to try and go in the beginning, because I was kind of playing silly buggers with the astral experience. So often I'd go out of body and I'd watch what people are doing, and I would try yanking them out of body, and often against their will early on. And I remember telling me, you know, don't do that again. In the nicest sense. It sounds a little bit like being like a teacher kind of thing. But I remember thinking, okay, so there's something going on. But I've often wondered, for this particular being in the silver suit, obviously he was able to take me out of the dream state into a very lucid state, which preceded what I would call a full-blown astral experience. You know, so therefore, and from other experiences which I'll relate, I feel that they know our workings very well. I feel that, you know, in terms of timelines, they either have a hand in our development, as in the making of us and our systems, or they're aspects of us in the future. I think that particular one was interesting because I remember hugging him / her as though he or she was a good friend. I remember that. I remember feeling that, a good friend, and I remember feeling that particular being kind of backing away, not really that comfortable with the emotional human experience, but a very loving energy nevertheless. And I remember often I had these experiences where I'd go up to these elevators at the end of my bed. Often they come in spates of experiences. And this is when I was living in Melbourne after living in Austria, where it all started. And then there's this elevator would pop at the end of the bed, and I realised that was astral because I knew there was an elevator in my room. That's how I knew. So that's what I call kind of real-time astral, or the out of body. But I remember getting the elevator, and I go up and I get off at this floor, and I'd meet with these beings around a table who looked a bit like us. Okay. But I remember thinking at the beginning they're kind of cold-hearted, but I remember after a while they had no barriers. So it was like they had no emotional bodies. And what I'm seeing, because all this thing has got me, all these experiences got me into energy healing, where often I will come upon a client and I will sense straight away that this person is an alien. Like I will see their body there. And what is interesting is when I communicate with that extraterrestrial, often, like I remember one particularly vivid experience, and that particular extraterrestrial wanted to experience what it was like to be emotional. Now, the human who'd come along had real issues expressing emotions. So that's interesting that those two were kind of having this, you know. But in this experience where I meet around this table, what I found is it was always telepathic. They were not human. They looked a bit like us. I thought maybe they're high dimensional aspects of us, but they seemed to have no emotional bodies, and it seemed to, you know, and then I started to wonder about the human experience. We tend to have this very dense emotional body that is often triggered, you know. But yeah, so that was the main parallel I see from the other ETs I've seen too, is that they tend to be more not cold-hearted. They just tend to operate. It's always telepathic the way they speak. They always speak by name, and they tend to be, the ones I meet anyway, tend to be less emotionally demonstrative than we are, which is interesting.
But they look more human than like a classic alien, pop culture style image.
The one that in a past life regression, that energy, which I've seen a couple of times, is kind of a longish, bluishy, greenish kind of thing. A different kind of, not the classic kind of grey kind of thing. And so there's sometimes, but generally humanish. The other ones probably spoken to Sheryl about before, but there was a really interesting one early on too, where I'd hear these frequencies. So it was like a jet screeching, and I knew often these different frequencies would come and wake me up. So it's like I'll be asleep, generally on my back, because before dawn I know that was when it was going to happen. So I kind of prepare for takeoff. And I kind of, after a while, I kind of called it in. You know, I kind of would imagine I'm listening kind of above my head or around myself as I fall asleep. So this kind of screeching jets would come in, and I'd go with it. And I remember the first time going out, really looking around, and all these astral bodies were going up, flying up away from the earth onto these massive ships. So whenever I've peeked out in what I call real-time astral above the earth, there are ships galore. Ships galore. The sky's full of ships. Anyway, so I remember going to these massive ships, it was plate metal, kind of that dullish grey metal, very modern. I remember walking around the ship, and the other humans that were there, everyone's kind of walking around naked. They were kind of like they were in a daze, half asleep, zombie-like. And I would be just above water. I felt like my conscious, I had to really stay with it to stay above, to stay conscious. I would be trying to talk people into, you know what's going on here. This is. Come on, mate. Come on, wake up, kind of stuff. I remember once going out this little portal, like a little door, but I was on the ship, but I thought, this is interesting. There's grass there, but it wasn't earth. And then there's these beings were very tall, probably 7.5 feet. They had white skin, kind of these weird eyes. I just remember really white. They were totally white. And always telepathic. I remember when I went out this little door, one of them spoke to me for the first time, and he said, I never forget it. He said, you can leave whenever you want. You can even kill yourself, but we will always have access to your energy, and that is all we need.
That's an interesting statement.
It was interesting. And I remember what would happen was there. I remember when I exited this, when I didn't go back, the last time I was there, we ran a massive, they'd feed us. So I remember the cutlery. I remember examining the cutlery, which is very good. But we're on these huge tables, all of these humans around, a few of these whites standing around. They'd feed us food, and it was quite weird. And I remember hearing a cow being slaughtered in the next room. And I stood up and I smacked the table with my fists. And I was moved to say, where next? Right? And then I remember them looking at me, and I wasn't invited back. That was the last time. That was the last time I went. When I analyzed the experience, it was the feeling, in dualistic terms, we would say, okay, are they negative beings or malevolent? I had the feeling that they were kind of taking their nourishment from kind of the unconscious traumatic human state. It was like they were kind of, I had the feeling that they were kind of recycling the unconscious state. So I had the feeling there was something to do with the karmic model. So a lot of this whole karmic model started coming, and I started getting kind of windows into the human experience and how certain beings gain nourishment or may perhaps manipulate certain things to gain. So they were just gaining nourishment from the human condition, from the unconscious human condition. That was the feeling.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There were a lot of people who reported alien abductions through the 90s who said exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. That they felt that they were somehow feeding off their energy.
That was the feeling, because I started feeling a bit, and of course at that stage of the game I was interested. I remember living in this house kind of in the country in Melbourne. I remember I would be calling these energies in, I wanted to get to the bottom of it. And I remember my wife freaking out, said, "You call aliens in large degree," because all these noises around the house, and it was interesting. I remember one day looking up at the sky and feeling this kind of black patch there, and I thought, okay, I'd started learning Reiki, and I went to my old Reiki master and said, "Look, I just want you to look in, and maybe I just felt I was going out there too much. I didn't really want to go. I made this choice, I didn't want to go, but we're still getting some experiences." And I remember and I didn't actually tell her what was going on, but I remember I went for some energy healing, and she said she pulled some kind of thing out of my third eye. And after that, I stopped going back there. So energetically in my body, there was some kind of, thing. She said it was some kind of crystalline thing that she felt was placed there. Now, what is curious is, so I didn't go back there again, right? And I was looking back, I was slightly frightened, but I felt good because I was awake there. So that was okay. And also the fact I almost watched myself have that reaction of saying, "Where next?" It was like that feeling, "Wake up, guys." Because whenever I try to talk to someone there, always there'd be one of these tall whites coming over looking at me. They were conscious of me playing kind of silly buggers on these ships. But I found that when that experience finished, I remember them. It was almost like these ones and also other little ones that had been running around the house that were more like probably greys, but kind of like etheric. I remember it was kind of like, I felt that they were in little bodysuits. I wasn't really afraid of them because I felt that they're actually in a suit of some kind. These were glasses, like sunglasses. And I remember when that was taken out, when I did want to remove because I was freaking me out a bit. I remember I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't feeling rested. I wasn't feeling well. Okay. And I made the decision. But when it was taken out, I remember them waving goodbye almost in the astral. And I remember feeling a bit sad that this was going away, but I felt it was better for my health and for my development that these particular beings not be, rattling around, because I was getting scared in the middle of the night. I was getting scared. So one can make the decision to say no, and that's what I tell abductees too. If you really don't want that experience, just say no.
Did you find that there were other paranormal experiences happening around you at the time?
It's a very good question. Look, it was kind of like, weird experiences of, I might have mentioned to you, Sheryl, before, but that feeling that I would have, like once, this levitation that went on once. So while I was awake, these frequencies coming in, and I would hear myself. I was brought up a Catholic, but I was never a practicing Catholic. But I remember hearing my higher voice say the Lord's Prayer, on heaven as in earth. It kept repeating, and it was lifting me off the ground. I thought, well, why am I being lifted off the ground? So it was pretty cool. I mean, I just like these really cool experiences, and I think what I felt was it amped up I was still doing music, but I was really getting into Reiki at that stage in a big way. And I remember just seeing clients and telling them, oh, you just bought a red car, or you just fell off a swing. And I remember a few of them freaking out, not coming back. And I remember one saying, well, how do you're reading my mind? I said, I'm not reading your mind. It's just in your aura was that you've just fallen off a swing. And I remember thinking that felt quite normal, but not really having that before. So it was the feeling of this, first of all, kind of preemptive aspect started coming in. So feeling that everything has already happened and I'm just sort of moving into it. And also slightly more psychic, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That way. And also I found that I started becoming more authentic in ways that weren't particularly good for my old job. Like I'd just start, not to be belligerent, but I just start, like it was almost another voice starting to speak. And I just start saying what was on my mind before I should have chosen those words, and therefore getting myself into trouble with so-called, that kind of thing.
What about, I'm sorry, Ben, go on.
Sorry, yeah. So can you like turn that all off and have a week off from it, for example? Like, can you consciously say, I'm not going to do anything this week. I want to have a good night's sleep every night this week, or does it come in regardless?
I have to say it comes in regardless. And
it does,
yeah. It's funny because I used to think, oh, bloody hell, but I thought it was good too. And then I thought, well, it kind of really hit home when about 12 years ago, I was just meditating one day, right? And I was sort of in my old life, but in my new life as well, right? And not sure, like a bit freaking out. And this is when I was having some really weird astral experience, like in terms of entities, like succubi and monsters. And I remember there was once I was going out night after night. This was at a pivotal point when I thought I could be going mad. I really thought that. I really thought, because I really, and I remember there was this being, and it was in the void, very scary. What I felt to be the personification of evil. I remember, skin of like maggots and the stench and like worms and she was throwing these energy balls at me, like, so we're both of us in the void, in a dark space, like just nothing. And I remember she hit me and I woke up with this and I thought, well, that actually hurt. And so each night I had no choice. I'd go out each night, and there she was again throwing energy balls, and I learned to intercept them with my own energy balls, but I couldn't whack her. A few nights later, probably a whole week later of this, and I remember thinking, okay, I've got three options. I'm either going, I've got to get help. I've got to get, maybe try to stop this from going on, or I'll just keep going out and see what happens. So I decided the latter. And, I thought that was the way to go, because I thought, well, in this reality, weird things happen too. So, but I remember she started to speak to me by name, and she said, Greg, you're getting good at the whole defending thing, aren't you? I remember thinking, well, that's a bit cryptic, the whole defending thing. What do you mean? And then she was right in front of me. I remember thinking I was going to astrally be sick because the stench isn't good. You smell like a dog up there, literally. Your sense of smell is very strong. And then I remember there was this, like, it sounds very classic, but that's how it happened. I remember my heart literally It wasn't a conscious decision. I felt this wave of empathy for her. I don't know why. And then her face became absolute radiance. And she said quite cryptically again, she said, you see, Greg, it's all the same. And I remember when I came out of this experience, I knew that because I was being plagued by some kind of negative entities often, what they would call threshold entities. And I remember coming out of this experience knowing that there was no such thing as evil, that it was all face of light seen through our own shadows. So it was kind of a very spiritual kind of awakening, that particular point. And I knew I was okay. I knew that, it was just a release of something. So that kind of fight in the astral, like little monsters popping up where you do that sometimes, or, say in the name of Jesus, or you just swear at them or whack them, that kind of came to a close. Then I felt a lot more balanced after that. I sort of felt, this is really good. This is guiding me. This is teaching me. I didn't have any fear at all after that. So that helped tremendously. Yeah.
I want to know, how do you yank someone out of their body? You said,
I know what you mean. Yeah, I'll tell you. What you do is you go up. So you go up to them out of their. Well, you go astral first.
Yeah.
And when you go up to them, if they're sleeping, and generally I'm going astral before dawn anyway, so that tends to be what happens. So when I look at it, you can see a human. When you see the human sleeping there, generally their astral body. So you can almost cajole it out. You'll see this kind of etheric-ish kind of body that is just above the physical, generally just before dawn. So generally I found the astral body does leave the physical body with everyone. And that astral body fills with all of this light and regenerative energies so that it takes the body, takes these energies back to the physical. So what you do is you go up to that person's astral body, say hi, and they will see you like a drunk person, generally. Sometimes they'll be wandering around the house. Sometimes they'll be having bizarre experiences. And then you grab them by the astral ankles and you pull them out.
Oh, okay. And
I'm serious.
Does the physical body flinch as a result?
Yeah, and it will often pull it back in. So you'll get resistance. Because when I would try that with some people, I mean, to be honest, in the beginning I was trying it with people I knew. But if I try it with a random, I wanted to, in the beginning, not that I was trying to scare people. Well, I did actually try to scare people. No, because
naughty.
No, it was because I didn't know. Look, and I think a lot of the old trauma, as you said before, was I said. I mean, as a kind of tortured kid, I think a lot of that was coming out of me in the astral. A lot of these fears, and so I was playing up a little bit. That was just the way I was acting, and and I'll get back to that pulling out. But I remember once trying to boo somebody. I remember I was in the astral. I was flying, and often I'd be flying around near churches. For some reason, I'd find myself often early on when sometimes I have some scary ones. I'd be in like the cellar of the church, and it was really scary, really, really scary. But I remember once flying down above a church, and this guy came out of the church, and I could see his aura, and he was looking very kind of proud of himself, energetically. And I flew down. And I screamed out, Jesus loves you, in the astral, right? And this person was walking around in 3D. And I felt his energy field get a shock. I could see the colors. And he kind of had this hesitation. And I thought, this is pretty cool. And so other times I'd stand in the street and I would inhabit the person. So they're walking through the street and they can't see me. And I would jump into their body and feel their body, right? And I could sense their emotional state. That was interesting. That was really interesting. And then once, though, when I was booing somebody, when I was saying, bah, I remember doing that once just to get it. And then this guy, very nice looking kind of blonde bloke, I just remember that, just said, Greg, don't do that again. And it was so gentle, so subtle. I don't do it justice by saying those words. It wasn't at all feeling like slap. It wasn't even a wrist slap. It was, I actually thought good early on because I thought there's guardians out here. And that I think gave me a lot more confidence because I know that it is a guided experience. You are kind of being monitored. You are being monitored. But it's not for that sake that you're going to be good or anything. You're just sort of moved to do things that I guess there's more discovery, One is moved to do that.
And
but getting back to the... Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, were those landscapes, were they places that you sort of would recognize? Were they sort of like, was it like Australia? Was it like Europe? Was it,
Yeah,
flying
it's a
over
good question.
Yeah, like what was
It
that like?
could have been either. A lot of them were kind of, I felt they were this reality. I mean, sometimes, and the weird thing is, I remember um, once I felt I'm in New York, but it was like different. I remember watching everybody and going, what's going on? Saw a newspaper, it said 1960. And it was, and often when I look at the words, things would start to get unclear, and you wake up. So if you focus too much on that kind of stuff, but those early experiences just felt like, it felt contemporary, and but not actually. Often, not always, but often not actual landscapes that I actually knew.
Fascinating.
And never any machinery, like no. Were you seeing cars and taxis and that sort of?
Yeah.
So you'd see all that in that landscape.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about the glyphs that you saw, because they also come up with, in people who report close encounters. Sometimes they see them, they'll report being in a spaceship, and there'll be those glyphs will be up on the wall in front of people who are, and like they're being educated to understand them. Other times I've noticed that they'll often be artists, for example, and I'm not surprised you're a musician. I'll talk a bit about that in a minute, but when they do their art, they incorporate these glyphs into the artwork, which is really curious. I don't know what the glyphs represent.
No.
Are they sort of some fabric of reality that they're picking up on? I don't really know. But I do remember some years ago, I went to the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival, and I was already aware of this. So I walked around where everyone was doing their artwork and the ones that had the glyphs in them. And there was someone there who actually had some essences, and they had on the logo, they had a glyph. And I asked all those people, I said, I didn't know whether to do it, but I thought, I'm going to do it. And I said, I happen to be a UFO researcher, and I noticed that you've got these glyphs here. And I said, how long have you been doing that? And have you ever had any sort of close encounters? And they all said, yes. So for me, what you're saying sounds very like a very real contact through your experience with extraterrestrials.
Totally. Yeah, that those glyphs were kind of like what fascinated me always with these experiences is the reality of it, and the high tech of it. Like that high tech, I remember it was like a screen, like you'd see in a video screen, with a little screen in the corner. Like it was very real, very high tech, accompanied with laser lights. I mean, and then the glyphs. So I couldn't help but have the feeling that these were beings who knew our workings very well. So I tend to think that they're somehow related to our creator beings of our systems, of our hard drives, or whatever you want to call them. So more and more, it's kind of led me to the conclusion that we are a form of AI, if you know what I mean. What I mean is we're a form of constructive intelligence in the best sense. In the best sense, I only say that because I just think, and as I've told a lot of students who I teach astral travel to, sometimes I've aborted as well. Like if someone's whacked their hands around my ankles and yanked me, sometimes I've said no, but generally I've gone in the spirit of adventure. And I tend to think that, like, I didn't have permission often to pull people out, and they didn't go out. So if someone takes you out, they generally know a lot about your workings, and there's some kind of permission going on. So even if it's to teach you what is not, like what I mean by that is, like, I've even had some like astral travel students say, that they had the shadow being standing next to the bed. They had this for a long time. Then eventually we did some meditations and stuff. They went astral, and they realized that it was actually them looking at themselves. So they became that being looking at themselves. So they were witnessing from the physical aspect, they were witnessing the remnant astral body still over them. So a lot of this confusion with the astral experience, and this is where a lot of fear comes in, and that often, even the media, I think there was a show a little while ago, a British series, where it portrayed body swapping, with astral travel, that's just not going to happen, I say to people, and so there is often this kind of stuff that comes out that puts a bit of fear there, but I think it's an absolutely joyous experience, and you just go. I mean, there are worse things than this reality. You can bump your head in this reality. What I think one develops a sense of confidence that if it's your time to come back, you're back in your body. There's no problem with that. You come back whenever you want.
Yeah. I think people are fearful of what they'll meet in the astral.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned seeing some strange things, and I think that's the fear, and that perhaps they can't deal with it.
It is interesting, and that's exactly right. And I think what happens is the more you see out there, like a couple of years ago was a classic experience where I just sort of, I think it was just last year actually, I just sort of faded, like I just went out of body. It's what I call faded out of body rather than a lot of frequency. So I was just all of a sudden out of body, and I recognized that because there was a woman hovering over my wife in bed, and I noticed she was hovering over her and she was doing stuff in her aura. As soon as she saw me see her, she got the fright of her life and exited out the wall. Now, I came fully to, my wife woke up and I said, what happened to you then? She said, I was having a nightmare. And she described the nightmare, and it was just a run-of-the-mill nightmare. It wasn't a nightmare about this person, but I felt this particular being was manipulating a field. Okay? Now, there's a couple of things here. Is that necessarily bad? I mean, perhaps that being is helping unconscious trauma realize itself in some kind of story, which I think nightmare is actually good in that way, right? But also, what's the other thing interesting is that when she saw me see her, she got the fright of her life, and I found that also early on there were these particular entities that I found would often be on top of me when I'd wake up, and often sort of hollering or screeching. And when I would see them, I remember they got such a shock. They were so shocked. I remember thinking like, basically, go. And they were gone. So as soon as your level of consciousness, I think that's the astral experience is actually, we're all going astral, but really when I say astral travel or astral projection or the astral experience, what I mean is how much of your level of consciousness is there, right? So if you can pull enough consciousness there, any entity that is up to no good is kind of going to scamper pretty quick, because they don't like being seen. They don't like kind of the light of your awareness, seeing them. So awareness is kind of, you could say in a way, is light. Awareness is like a torch being shone. I think the collective human experience is kind of in this murky waters. I think what the astral experience teaches us is kind of, we know there's a surface to these waters, is how to, to swim to that surface. And we're all doing that anyway. But it's just one way of getting there.
Have you ever found out or come to any understanding as to why this started when it did?
Interesting. I think it's like a time capsule, I mean, why? It's a good question. In many ways, if I look back, you mean in my life generally?
Yeah, I'm thinking like, why then?
Okay. I think I was reaching a threshold of frustration in my career. I looking back, because I was involved in orchestral conducting, and I remember I was very ambitious but frustrated, and I was really having problems with the musical world in terms of the egocentric world. I also really had issues. I don't know, a little bit of imposter syndrome. Also, I felt it kind of came easy to me, that world. I realized that it was kind of past life stuff, and it wasn't really pushing me on certain levels. But I realized that this spiritual world, looking back as a kid, having a lot of lucid, doing a lot of sleepwalking, I had no real interest in UFOs, but as a little kid, I remember I used to build UFOs, which is a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a telltale sign.
Oh, that's right. So, but it's a tricky one. I haven't looked at that probably too much. I just think it was like a little time capsule. I just had to go that way. It was just I had free will. I still feel I had free will, but I remember what was really weird was, I remember the last time conducting a concert, I was having these astral experiences, not telling people about them, not really sharing it. And I remember the last time I'm conducting away, and I remember feeling these hands, like the astral hands around my ankles. These invisible hands came to my wrists and started to pull me away. And I remember sweating, thinking, just get through this concert, And I remember thinking, okay, I swear this is the last one I'll do. And it was like, I really had the feeling I was being pulled away, like, no, not that way. So it was a little bit of, it was a bit of hard arming. It was a little bit of, in my particular case, you got no choice, buddy. And I remember even after that experience with that being of what I saw as evil and turning into light, I remember I was meditating one day in the same house in the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria, and I felt a little tweak at the back of my left brain. I went out to my wife after it and said, okay, something really weird has happened. And at this stage, I was still doing music, doing a bit of Reiki, but not really telling people about it, not telling people about astral stuff. And what had happened was this: I could not put a sentence together. I could not remember the names of people in my family. I would call an orange a tomato. It was embarrassing. So I was going to my music work, having to rehearse the names of my colleagues. So therefore I couldn't have a conversation. And I was a really funny guy, right? I'm still a funny guy, but I was a really funny guy, like often, laughing things off. So I went very quiet. And I remember, but someone who I did know was going through this said, okay, it's a trade-off, Greg. Because you've been having these out-of-body experiences, that's why, because what I noticed was the back of my mind, that the narrator or the monkey mind had gone silent. Nothing was going on. Years later, I had concussion when I moved to Brisbane. And I got it checked out because I mentioned that I had this little tweak and I couldn't speak properly. And they checked for lesions. They said, okay, maybe you had a mini stroke, but it wasn't that. I know it wasn't that. What it did was, I remember we all of a sudden moved to Spain. Then for 2 years, I basically didn't do much. I remember I wrote my book on astral travel as a therapy to get from one end of the sentence to the other. I just thought, I'm going to write down my experiences of life as a therapy. Then after I wrote that book, then people would contact me and say, can you teach me astral travel? And I would say, I don't know, let's see. So it kind of, it was like a corner. It was like, so the tweak in the brain was kind of like, this is the end of your old life. And you are now going to enter fully into this new life. It really was like that. It was really bizarre because I just couldn't speak normally. So people were thinking this is a bit weird. I felt I just had to go away.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. So you're still teaching astral travel now?
Yeah, it's good.
Where do you teach it? Tell people so.
Well, I got absolutely. I got a studio in Brisbane, so I got a workshop this Sunday that is booked out. But I just do, because of the work. I don't want to have too many people. I've got in my studio just for this weekend, 6 people on the Sunday, and just and also people come individuals as well as Zoom. So yeah, it's interesting how that progresses. How you kind of find new techniques, because I find everybody's different. It's good.
Do you find the students? Do people, like all things, some take to it readily and others have resistance, or once you're on the path, you do make progressions despite yourself?
Yeah. I find a lot of it, that's exactly right. Generally, the shape of these and the single sessions goes the way everyone's wired a little bit differently. I found people are really keen and have an idea of it, have researched it a bit. It does help. Do you know what I mean? They if someone comes in really afraid of the experience, and they've probably got to work through that before, everyone's a little bit different. And I think losing the fear of perhaps seeing an ET or a strange being, is a big thing. Just, and I think that what comes with that is a change of your definition of this reality. Because what's curious is a few years ago, I had these Buddhist monks come to an astral workshop. Really cool to hear their perspective on astral experience. They're really into it. And I really liked it because I don't research much stuff myself, because I just like to do it. I just think that's my things to do it firsthand, and I get bored when I'm researching. So, but I remember hearing the Om once in the astral, like a very low AUM, like a very low male AUM. And then thinking, okay, I must Google that. There's obviously something to the notion of Om. But I just remember these guys. It's really interesting. You hear all different aspects of the astral experience, and I was most interested to hear that they're really into it as well. So I think, it's so much more open. This whole, I didn't know what the astral. I remember when people first came to workshops, I'd look at them very suspiciously and thinking, why on earth would you come? I would look at them. I think, why have you come here? Why would you go and want to learn how to body? So, but it's so natural when people realize that everyone's doing it anyway. Just a question of waking up in the body.
Fascinating.
Have you ever, just one other quick question.
Yeah.
Has it ever come to almost like a heavenly experience in terms of maybe seeing relatives or anything like that at all? Is that, is there that sort of parallel to it, or it's heavenly but it's not in that context?
It's funny you say that. I remember once, it was hilarious. I went up one of these elevators once, and what would happen is at the different levels you get eyes looking at you through these cracks, sometimes pairs of eyes. And I went around the top once, and it was beautiful. Like, I never forget, it reminded me of a European cafe in spring, summer. People were sitting around, and I said to a woman, and it was, I remember looking at the beautiful pavings, and like, it was real. Like, in the astral, I analyze everything and go, wow, this is. And I said to a woman, where are we? And she said, heaven. It was hilarious. And I remember thinking very funny, but it really, and I thought to myself, well, interesting, there's this notion. I do like cafes, I guess, but that was funny. That, I guess it just felt very nice. But I suppose what you really, it was kind of comical in many ways, but it did feel particularly nice. I tend to think that this notion of heaven is interesting, and meeting loved ones. For me, the loved ones I've met are people I don't know, or beings I don't know. As I said, these beings I would meet around the table, and they would talk to me rather than glyphs. They were talking to me on levels I had no idea. I remember thinking, this is amazing what they're saying, but I have absolutely zero idea what they're saying, right? And I remember when I would speak to them in a group, what would come out of my head was very lucid, but I had no plan. But I remember thinking I didn't want to leave. I remember this vibe was so ecstatic there. I thought these were the higher dimensional humans. I remember I didn't want to leave. I remember holding the table the last time I was there, and they said, it's okay, you got to go. You'll be back before you know. But I remember thinking, but this isn't bad here. But that was before the tweak in the back of the head when I sort of came to terms with it.
Fascinating.
Wait, I just want to ask you one last question too, Greg. When you talk about your experiences to people, and I'm imagine that you revivify it for yourself, are you always sort of, I know people, when you have a strange experience, it goes, at the time you go, wow, what the heck was that? And you sort of think it all through and try and analyze it and put it together. And then you sort of shift it off to the side for a bit, even though you've had the experience, but the initial impact of it sort of, although it continues to resonate, it's not till you actually start talking about it again that it comes alive again. Do you find that after you talk about your experiences that it re-impresses you, or maybe it should, of what an amazing experience it actually was that you had?
That's an interesting question. Look, I think yes and no. I mean, it does, but by the same token, I kind of feel kind of detached. I don't know. Because I think you want to. I'm always thinking, what's the next thing in terms of a new? I almost don't want to quantify it too much, if you know what I mean. So it's like becoming nobody. It's a weird thing. I often teachers in the astral things too is this notion of almost being invisible, so you let it happen. So it's like not wanting to identify, getting excited about it, but it's happened, and kind of almost you've embodied that experience, so you kind of move on from it in many ways. Probably not answering a question. I don't think I'm answering any question there.
No, I think you have.
I'm not even sure what I'm saying.
I think
what
you
am
have.
I saying? I'm ranting.
because you're saying you've embodied it, so you move on, and a bit like embodied it, and it's still there, but you're just riding the wave of it.
Exactly. And I reckon that's our role, because for a while I think, some of these really intense experiences I had early on were intense because they were early on.
Mm.
Okay. And we often want to have those. I know some of the students have those experiences and they want to have those particular ones again. I say, well, it might not happen that way the next time. So really, one does embody these experiences in that they become a part of you. You know what I mean? I think that's the role of them, rather than just seeking them gratuitously or craving them for their sake. You just let them come along in many ways. Just prepare the soil and let them happen, but kind of learn from them, I guess.
Yeah, not getting hung up on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, amazing, Greg. I just think it's an amazing experiences that you've had, that's for sure, because not a lot of people would have had all those experiences.
No, it's so multifaceted too.
Yeah.
It's not just one experience. Every time it's something different.
Oh, really weird. Even to seeing dinosaurs with, I wanted to see this experience because I heard of the stampede once in the desert, and there were dinosaurs that had down and feathers and beautiful colors and, things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see, or beautiful temples that, you wouldn't. It's just a beautiful experiences, and the beings you meet. I think just from that viewpoint, it's just so phenomenal. It's just so, the phenomenon of it is just great fun. Great fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your experiences with us, Greg. Fascinating. I've heard them before, but this is always hear different things, and I can see how you've moved along and evolved with it and all that. That's always interesting to watch too. So we really appreciate you coming on here, spending time with us and sharing your story. And people watching, how do they find you?
They find me in the astral.
Good answer.
Tee-hee. Well, kind of. Greg Doyle, astral.com. GregDoyleAstral.com.
Okay.
You find me there. So yeah, absolutely. All sorts of things.
And plus the book, where the book's obviously still
I've got
available.
It is still available. I'm going to make it an Audible thing. That's how it looks. Awakening the Giant Within. So
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting read. People have said it's not boring, which is nice enough.
Yeah, I've got it. It's a good book.
It's been great chatting too. Yeah, and it's been great talking. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
And if you enjoyed this this episode, please remember to like it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Remember to tap the bell so you get the notifications when we upload all our episodes. So until next time, say ciao for now.
See you then.
Bye.